Hello and welcome back. Today we're going to be looking at some more free horror games. Once again, sometimes these are recent games from itch.io and Steam, and other times they're relics from the internet. There'll be links to all of them in the description. Most of these are very short, with the longest being about an hour long. Up first is The Moth Inside Me, where your home is being overtaken by a moth-like entity. The game is very abstract and surreal and is often felt more than it is played. Walking through the environments and taking in the atmosphere is really all that's expected of you, and the atmosphere itself is that of a tainted dream. Not always a nightmare, just an unpleasant dream that's slowly getting worse. You walk teetering on the edge of consciousness and sleep as you experience more and more unsettling and hard to explain dreamlike events. The game doesn't really have too many scary moments, just lots of unpleasant experiences that are awkward and hard to comprehend. It doesn't really feel like it's trying to scare you though. The sound design is washed over in this faint tape hiss, a video cassette memory soaked in reverb. Like some other Soda Raptor games, the experience of the audio and the visuals combined is what makes the atmosphere feel so dreamlike and unreal. Winding organs and synths, everything feels like it's in your head, while also being played to you from the end of a mine shaft. There's gore in the game in the form of the pulsating mass that lurks in your living room, and again, it's strange and discomforting, unexplainable and hard to comprehend, not unlike the story. It's near incomprehensible, with the act of trying to string the events together being more of a personal challenge than anything you could verify for certain. It's a dream simulator, and the experience of playing it is that you walked away with feelings more than facts. It's a very impressive, unsettling experience that will either vibe with people or it won't. The game is around an hour long. Midnight Postman is a first-person horror game where you play as a Japanese delivery man who ponders life as he makes deliveries. The game's atmosphere really feels like it should seep in as you walk through the streets from destination to destination, with the main character talking about their life and how it feels hopeless. Whilst this is a bit depressing and lonely, the feeling that manifests around it doesn't amount to much of anything. You wait for something to happen, but after a while it really doesn't feel like anything will. It does escalate right at the end, but it feels a bit too late by then. The game has a jump scare and an attempted jump scare, with one being fairly decent and the other falling a bit limp due to its execution. The game's sound design is pretty basic. There's only really one piece of music and the street ambiance to fill your ears as you explore the empty streets. There's no voice acting, but the sound effects are fairly realistic. What little there is. There's no gore in the game, and it didn't need any. The story is mainly that you're a delivery man and a dead-end job. Some of the people you deliver to are eccentric and strange, as is the nature of the job. The story doesn't really feel like it's going much of anywhere for ages until the very end, where you seem shoehorned into doing something that feels like an obviously bad idea within the context of a horror game. For the amount of writing about the character's life, it really didn't seem to do much but fill in the gaps between walking, and even then it's not as preferable to actual events. The game is just slow, and sadly a little boring. Nothing much transpires and the atmosphere isn't present until the end, which makes the first 9 minutes of a 12-minute game feel like filler material. Wrong Floor is a short first-person horror game made by the same people who made From the Darkness, and it works in a very similar way. Wrong Floor sees you getting off at the wrong floor in a familiar block of flats and has you try to escape the wrong place you've ended up in. The atmosphere is extremely heavy from the get-go, with the camera's movement and the narrow cone of the flashlight making walking and trailing the light over things feel like a build-up to a jump scare in itself. The low rumbling and build-up of the game's music, the tight cramped environments, and the game's plentiful eerie moments and nerve-shattering jump scares make the atmosphere soaked with a constant feeling of dread. The feeling in your stomach sinks a little further each time anything happens. The scares range from unsettling moments to terrifying jump scares and difficult situations, and the game delivers them not in rapid fire, but with a frequency that leaves you agonizingly waiting for the next one, seconds after the last one. Just being in some rooms is enough to make you want to leave. The game's sound design ranges from barely audible water droplets and eerie breathing all the way to deafening noises when a jump scare hits. The sound effects are done really well, with so many feeling extremely realistic, especially the footsteps combined with the reverb. Gore-wise, the game also has a few fairly gnarly corpses and the implication of a lot of things that happened in the past that's fairly unsettling to see. The game's story is extremely basic, mainly just dropping you off at the wrong floor and making you walk through the house of horrors to find the exit. There's what you could call environmental storytelling with corpses and mattresses left on the floor, but it's a bit of a push. There's also a pretty funny sign that simply describes your tormentor as a maniac that did take away from the atmosphere briefly, but that's about it for the story in general. Really, it's a bite-sized chunk of From the Darkness, an already terrifying game, and it uses similar assets and other things as well. It feels like a selection of leftover ideas, but these ideas were all done very well. The game is free on itch.io and again lasts about 13 to 15 minutes depending on how lost you get. Blood Mall is a first-person, low-budget PlayStation 1 style VHS horror game where you play as a police officer sent into a mall alone with a gun after some unknown monster that has slain everyone inside. The game's atmosphere is a brilliant balance of tension and comedy, with the actual gameplay being this slow, suspenseful walk around a blood-stained mall as you place down hunks of meat to attract the creature and then shoot it, the caveat being the time between gun reloads and the speed of the creature. Both are fast, but one seems a lot faster. The comedy comes from the dialogue and the overall cheesiness. It's always amusing and never takes you out of the moment for too long. The game's scares obviously come from dealing with the monster, but there's a few minor jump scares to bridge the gap between the encounters that are a bit hit or miss but could at least startle some players.
Oh God!
The creature is fast and nearly always felt like you were racing against the clock to shoot it before it devours you, which is really impressively done, with the same nerve-wracking timing going into the chase sequence at the end of the game. It's pulse-pounding and can be really intense. The game's audio is deliberately low budget to fit the game, but the sound effects were still good. The music had that classic 80s synth soundtrack, and the voice acting is again really great in the way that it's so bad that it's good, with Captain Reed having some hilariously cheesy lines of dialogue.
We have a pediatrician on the line.
Paleontologist, Captain. I'm Dr. Beatty, trying to help in any way I can.
Doctor, there are these spears everywhere.
There's more than enough gore being pretty much everywhere you look, with various corpses left spiked to the walls and the colour red being overwhelmingly apparent. The story is basically that something has gone loose in the mall, and throughout the game you get little tidbits of information about it, though most of the story comes after the game is over with a pretty fun post-credit sequence. It didn't need to be incredible, it just needed to be fun, and it was. The game is about 20 minutes long, and it's a blast. Evaluation is a program simulator where you interact with a religiously themed questionnaire. The game's atmosphere starts off with a lot of sincerity as it asks you the sort of questions you'd expect of a religious questionnaire. There's some mild tension, but as time goes on and the more you answer, the more it starts to seem more capable than it lets on, asking you a lot of difficult questions that rely on your level of belief and empathy to be invested in. But it goes further than that, trying to convince you that you've summoned something, and the atmosphere changes rapidly. But really it'll be more or less convincing to you depending on your level of belief. It deliberately attempts to obscure certain things by using names that wouldn't be common knowledge to lead you to believe that you're going more towards something good than something bad, despite sometimes conflicting visuals. The game tries to scare you a few times, but mainly through sound effects and being deeply disturbing. It achieves this more through its atmosphere, but there's a terrifying feeling that the game does an excellent job of conveying. Around the middle of the game it attempts to contact the impossible, which again, depending on your level of immersion and belief, will affect you in different ways. The game's sound design is pretty minimal, with just the computer ambiance being the majority of the experience. But the sound effects are really great and designed to trick you, and with decent headphones, this totally worked. Sadly, it uses the same one every time, so it only worked once, but it was still very impressive. There's some voice acting with heavy modifications, and it's done really well. There's no gore in the game, and it didn't really seem to need any, but there were multiple endings, so the game could contain more based on your options. The game's story is really just that you're playing a religious evaluation program that asks you questions about your faith, your ideals, and your beliefs. It then puts you in touch with something, and the game's better left unexplained from there. The story is pretty good, though the big thing is that it needs to convince the player of its authenticity, which it does a pretty decent job with, usually. The big thing about the game is how you'll either be absorbed into it or fail to do so, and the whole experience really hinges on that. The game is about 15 minutes long. Water Womb World is a first-person deep-sea diving and recovery game where you play as a religious scientist who's searching for the point of where man fell from grace. The concept alone sets an ominous tone, and the ideas presented give off this unsettling feeling, as well as the confidence the player character exudes in their belief of finding evidence of this event at the bottom of the ocean. The actual diving is again strange and unsettling as you sift through silt and throw nets to capture things, but the atmosphere progresses with the story and gets increasingly more disturbing as the character's descent into madness, or truth, blossoms into a dark realization. There's feelings of dread and uncertainty as you're presented with a lot of confounding revelations. The game's scares are almost entirely conceptual, with the idea of reality and religion and all these alternative ideas being presented in a very factual way by the main character. You find fish that can't die and discover the secrets of life, and none of it is pleasant. It's constantly unsettling, especially when it turns out to be right. The sound design is full of low bitrate warbling tones, computer noises, and unnerving drones that drift in and out of the game like a cloud made of lead. The sound effects for specific things can be incredibly disturbing. There's not a great deal of gore in the game, and it didn't really need any, but the story manages to walk the line between the dangers of science and the unsettling religious tones, with lots of phrases that will stick in your mind, and the way the main character theorizes about the scientific origin of certain things alongside the religious implications is fascinatingly horrifying. The game is really, really strange, uniquely weird, and disturbing. It's about 20 minutes long. Thunderhead is a first-person game where you're playing as a milkman delivering milk to the town of Thunderhead. The game's atmosphere is pretty relaxed, with the majority of the game just being delivering milk, and there's not really the feeling of much of anything. The town is a little eerie, but that's about it. It does raise some tension near the end where the game's action comes into play though. There's not much in the way of scares until, again, the end, where a large action piece takes place. The game's sound design seems fairly barren, but has some amazing, thunderous western-themed music that absolutely steals the show every time it plays. The rest of the sound design obviously pales in comparison, but it is still pretty good. There's no real gore in the game, and it didn't really need any either. The story tells of Milkman Joe delivering to the town of Thunderhead, where he tries to deliver to the church. He finds a note saying that evil has fallen on Thunderhead. The story's plot twist is not what you'd expect at all, which was a pleasant surprise, but the game didn't really have that much to work with in that time. Thunderhead was impressively made, but pretty devoid of horror, sadly. The game is about 15 minutes long. And that's it for another compilation of short, free horror games, the links to all of which will be in the description for the video. There's once again so many of these to get through, and hopefully I'll have even more to show you in the future. Thanks for watching, and always go check out Bumps in the Middle of the Night. Peace.